So everyone, welcome to the Sustainability Future for Energy and Chemicals session here at ARC Advisory Group Industry Forum. So I'm Peter Reynolds. I'm an industry principal with ARC. So for those of you that are new to sessions, this session will be about 90 minutes in duration. And as your MC, I'll be framing this topic before handing over to a couple of industry leaders from Dow and BP and AspenTech to discuss their company's approach to sustainability. We'll then discuss key factors impacting sustainability. I'm just gonna make sure my slides work. Good, we got it. Okay, so to get things started, you'll often hear about ESG and sustainability in the same sentence. So in some cases, you might even see these two words as used interchangeably, but they're not really the same thing. So when it comes to disclosing and benchmarking data on ESG, there's actually a remarkable difference between the two. So in recent months, the bigger discussion amongst industry leaders is with sustainability, climate, and protecting the planet. So to help frame this topic for the session, environmental, social, and governance, or ESG criteria, this is really a set of standards for a company's operations that are socially conscious or socially conscious investors that use ESG to screen for potential investments. So ESG criteria consider how a company performs as a steward of nature. Social criteria examine how it manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and with communities where it operates. Now, on the other hand, corporate social responsibility is it's a self-regulating business model that helps a company be socially accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and to the public. Now, this slide is about sustainability eating the world. And the reason I've framed it like this is because sustainability really focuses on meeting the needs of the present world without compromising the ability of future generations to meet the needs. The concept of sustainability is often composed of three pillars, usually economic, environmental, and social, and known informally often as profits, planet, and people. In the broadest sense, sustainability is represented by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll talk a little bit about that. You may have seen, these posted on various places through the internet or government offices, or even they show up in schools for awareness. So if you're not familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short, these are really a collection of 17 global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. So the SDGs were established in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly and intended to be achieved by the year 2030. So these are part of a UN resolution and are currently on the 2030 agenda. So the SDGs, they typically include, and I won't go through all of these, they include goals such as no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, and quality education. However, industry tends to place more emphasis on things like affordable and clean energy, responsible consumption and production, and improving life below water or on land. And for the purpose of this session, we're really going to focus more on the industrial side and what's happening in the energy and chemicals industry. So back in early 2020, ARC Advisory Group conducted research to better understand the current state of sustainability and green initiatives with our industry and our clients. So specifically, we wanted to learn where companies are focusing their efforts, what challenges they face, and what technologies ultimately can advance their efforts. And we found that 90% of global energy and chemical companies had sustainability initiatives in place, and over 3/4 actually believe digitalization was an important factor in achieving their goals. So, and those of you that are interested, on the screen, I'm sharing an image of what that report looks like. Those that are interested in that report, you can please follow up with me or a representative from ARC at the end of this session. But we basically, through this research, we asked more than 200 practitioners about the drivers for their sustainability programs. And top of mind for many industrials are things like increasing access to capital, satisfying customer buying requirements, and ultimately to gain a competitive advantage. So what is sustainability and why are we talking about this now at an ARC conference? This is probably one of the most important questions. And if you're here, you really ultimately want to know, the answer to this question. So for energy, oil and gas companies, and many oil and gas companies are becoming energy companies because of some important factors. So these industries tend to focus more on things like energy and transition. So these are things like providing clean, affordable energy, low carbon, reducing flaring and such, while the chemicals industry is really geared towards creating sustainable products, advancing something called the circular economy, producing less product waste and fewer or less industrial emissions. And what's happening today is there's a couple of things. One, there's consumer pressure that's taking place for a need for more sustainable products. There's also, so in addition to consumer pressure, there's government pressure, new regulations for fuels and environmental and clean products. And recently, directives from the investment community like BlackRock are driving sustainability to the highest imperative for many industrial companies. So as the world progresses beyond this pandemic that we're in today and stabilization occurs, capital investment is going to be top of mind as energy and transition and creating sustainable products gain more and more traction within the industry. So what I want to do next is I really want to turn this over to some of the experts that I've brought in today for this session. And I was remarking, I attended a session yesterday, and the MC, like me, in between the presentations, when he would introduce his next speaker, the analyst would actually flip up a picture of the globe, and as if you were booking a flight. And in this particular session yesterday, there were speakers from Australia, speakers from Saudi Arabia, and other parts of the country. And it was really interesting to get that perspective, because here we are at the 25th Industrial Forum for ARC. It's the first time that it's virtual, and I'm really happy to say that we've actually brought experts from all over the world for this session without enduring the cost of flights and the carbon footprint that goes along with those flights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our senior leaders in this session. So we're going to start with a couple of presentations from Dow first, and then BP, and then we're going to be joined in a panel session following this. So the first industry expert is Mary Draves, and Mary is Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety with Dow. And next is Merle Wingfield. Merle is Vice President of Environmental Sustainability with BP. And last but not least, Ron Beck is Industry Marketing Director with Aspen Technology. So we're going to start with Mary. And so Mary, maybe before you begin your presentation, and I know you're probably going to gear up to start sharing a couple of slides here, would you mind turning on your camera and telling us a little bit more about yourself as you're getting ready?
Yeah, sure, Peter. And while I'm talking, I'm just going to pull up my slides. Hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. The wonders of technology are with us today. Excuse me. Yeah, so my name is Mary Draves, and I am the Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of EH&S for Dow. I've been with Dow for a number of years. This is my 32nd year. So very excited to be with Dow and to have had so many wonderful experiences with the company. I'm a mother of two. I have a 21-year-old daughter who attends Iowa State studying agronomy and genetics. And then I have a son who is at Parsons in New York City studying design. My husband and I reside in Michigan, where it's very cold today, as we discussed in the green room. And we enjoy to do a lot of things outdoors. We enjoy the water here in Michigan. And so we're looking forward to a wonderful summer in a few months. So Peter, I'm very happy to be here today and very excited to talk a bit more about Dow's Dow's journey in sustainability. And I will say, I think that we have really, quite a remarkable journey that we've been on for the history of our company. And I think that's what's very exciting. Just a little bit about Dow as a company. We spun out of, our Dow DuPont merger in 2019. And, we have taken, I think, a new way of looking at things. And, we're a new 125-year-old company. So I think that's an exciting place to be, especially for people like me, sitting in the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer and also to be engaged in EH&S. So just a few things about our company. We're about just shy of 36,000 employees globally. We have 100 plus manufacturing sites, and then our net sales of 39 billion. So the company itself has been transformed. And I think what's very exciting is what is our new ambition, right? The new ambition that Dow has is really to be the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable material science company in the world. This is about us delivering for the world, and what can our products do. And we talk about ESG, and you mentioned that in your opening remarks. ESG has become paramount and is really one of the things that is held at the very top of our company. Our CEO is very engaged in this discussion. And how does that ESG strategy become inherent to our long-term value proposition? It's very important, and it guides our responsible behaviors, and it really delivers that growth from top and bottom line benefits. So ESG is part of who we are and what we do. Team Dow is fully aligned and empowered to drive this ambition through every decision that we make. And I think what you'll see with us is that, the years that have passed have posed a number of challenges for us. In the last year, a pandemic, which we've all been experiencing, a flood in our hometown of Midland, Michigan, put many of our employees out of their homes for a long period of time, an extremely active hurricane season. But yet we've continued amidst all of this to advance our ambition as a strategic driver of long-term value for Dow. So this is very important to us. And many would have said, well, pandemic, we're not going to do anything on sustainability extra next year, but we did more. And even we'll talk a little bit about the new goals that we've announced. So sustainability, as I said, is not a new thing to Dow. In fact, the E part of our culture has been threaded through our values for 120 plus years. The sustainability story stretches way back to the beginning of our company with H.H. Dow. He probably was sustainable and cool before sustainability was cool. He was committed to saving energy, reducing waste, and really focusing on safe and efficient operations. And I think that's very, very important. And that legacy of that commitment to sustainability really remains at the core, the absolute core of our culture today, with top-down commitment and that bottom-up alignment in action. And I think you'll see this. And it really starts at the top, at the very top of our company. More than 30 years ago, we created a voluntary board committee that really has the focus on environmental health and safety and sustainability, right? So they help guide our discussion on this, and they continue to do that even today. Recently, we've established what we call our ESG reporting team. And this team really helps us understand what are the best practices for our disclosures and how do we use those to help meet our key stakeholders' expectations. But it goes really beyond this corporate structure as we look at, how do we engage every employee across the company? Sustainability is infused in our culture. We see work that we've done on making decisions. How do we run our businesses? How do we run our operations? How do we innovate new products? But that comes from our people. So we have grassroots community of practice where we look at topics like circular economy, natural capital, sustainable innovation, things that are important to the functioning of our organization. And this year, we also added an ESG metric to our company's performance award, which I think was really important to make sure that we're being held accountable to deliver against this ambition. We talked a bit about Dow's long history of setting ambitious sustainability goals. And I remember back in the 90s when we first started talking about sustainability goals, what was this going to be like? How was this going to change the way we operated? And it was very exciting to see us setting extremely ambitious targets and commitments in safety and health and sustainability. This was about creating tremendous value for the environment and for our customers. And that first set of sustainability goals we talk about as our footprint goals. The goals where we're looking at how are our operations impacting and what can we do to reduce, right? To reduce costs, our waste, and our risk. That first set, as I said, that first set was about our footprint. We saw dramatic reductions in things like energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, and water use. We then issued a second set of goals, or what we call our handprint goals. And these were about us producing more sustainable products alongside our customers, really to start to address world challenges. So these first two generations of goals, over 20 years of work, created $6 billion worth of economic savings for the company. And now I'm pleased to report we're halfway through our third set of sustainability goals, our third 10-year set of sustainability goals. And these we call our blueprint goals. And this is about us rethinking collaboration and how do we take and collaborate to solve the world's biggest challenges, the things that we all know, like climate change, circularity. How do we solve those? And how do we take the experiences that we have to work together to do more? Because we believe that is our responsibility to do more. So as we look at where we are today, as I mentioned back in 2019, post separation of Dow DuPont, we said to ourselves, how do we accelerate that roadmap for sustainability? What is it that we really want to focus in on? What is it that our company needs to do to address these critically important issues? And where can we make the most significant impact? Okay, so the answer really for us was on these three areas of circular economy, climate protection, and safer materials. How can we contribute to each one of these? We developed then new long-term targets against these, and we'll talk about those in a moment, about carbon neutrality. And so they're focused on carbon neutrality and also a world without plastic waste. As we know, climate change and plastic waste are some of the biggest challenges that we face today. But we know that Dow know-how, Dow products and technology are critical to solving both. So very important that we focus on these. It's also important to highlight that all of these new targets that we have focus and our sustainability goals, our already existing sustainability goals, support them and help augment them as we move forward. So last year, in the middle of a pandemic, in June of 2020, we announced new carbon and circularity goals. So we said we know that these are very important to solving from a world challenge perspective. And we know also that and recognize that these two are closely linked, right? Climate and circularity are very closely linked. So we thought that it was important to talk about these together. So the targets offer us an opportunity to drive meaningful progress through our collaborations and then our technological advancements, along with our value chain partners, our customers, governments, NGOs, communities, and a wide variety of other stakeholders. Our Protect the Climate goal is about our commitment to implementing advanced technologies that will help us reduce our emissions even further by 5 million metric tons versus our 2020 baseline. And then how those same things will help us deliver against carbon neutrality, which is in alignment with the Paris Agreement. When we look at our Stop the Waste and Close the Loop goals, this is about Dow investing and collaborating in key technologies and infrastructure that significantly will increase global recycling. And at the same time, how do we design our products to be 100% recyclable or reusable by 2035? So we are committed to this. We're committed to the redesigning and promoting of reusable materials. And then how does that help us meet these targets? So what about our action plan? What are we going to do? So we took a look at our climate action plan and we really turned this into a comprehensive approach that evolves consistently. We have a program management office that has been established with cross-functional teams that work collectively and collaboratively on the path to carbon neutrality. We had a tremendous amount of advancement already. We've optimized our current manufacturing assets. We're also one of the largest purchasers of renewable power in our industry. We're the number one in our industry and among the top 15 global companies who do this. We've also implemented transitional technologies and are looking at many others about how do we innovate to get to a lower carbon future. So one of those is the FCDH technology that we're instituting in our Louisiana operations that will reduce emissions by another 20%. Our ultimate objective is that we have a resilient carbon portfolio that has long-term value and then decreased carbon exposure. So as we talk about our action plan for closing the loop and stopping the waste, we looked at 3 key areas about delivering or keeping plastic out of the environment, which is very important, increasing our impact through partnerships, and then delivering circular economy solutions. To keep the plastic out of the environment, we're working on all kinds of different infrastructure projects that enable global plastic recycling. We work with partners on a variety of projects, and one of those highlighted here is recycle plastic roads. And I was happy to report that one of these roads was very near where I lived, or where I have lived. So it's very exciting to see a project like this come to life in our communities. We're also focused on key partnerships like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, of which we are a founder. Many companies coming together and have committed over $1.5 billion to develop solutions at scale that help us manage plastic waste and promote post-end uses of plastic waste. And then when we're talking about delivering circular economy solutions, we have partnerships. 2 of those highlighted here, our partnerships with the Funex Ecogy Group about a supply of new feedstocks from recycled plastics. And then also we're working with brands such as Kellogg's on packaging that's fully recyclable. So we are absolutely 100% committed to improvement and transparency. And Peter mentioned this in his opening comments about ESG. We're committed to that continued transparency in our reporting and our disclosure. And you'll see last year we issued, we've issued our sustainability report now for 20 years. And we have a long history in this reporting. This past year, we built upon the GRI framework and included disclosures that were aligned to the SASB standards, which was a big step for us forward. We also included discussions of our sustainability practices in our proxies. And then along with our participation on the TCFD task force, we've committed to implementing the TCFD disclosure recommendations by 2022, and very excited about this. And we recognize that continuous improvement is important, and we have a governance structure in place that helps us maintain this work and the consistency in our disclosure practices. And finally, I'd just like to share with you, Dow has been recognized many times in the last several years about our commitments and our actions, and it's demonstrated here by the awards that we've received. So I appreciate, Peter, the opportunity to come and speak to you a little bit about Dow's journey on sustainability and the importance of sustainability in our business practices.
Thanks, Mary. Excellent presentation. It's certainly a bold move Dow is undertaking. So at this point in time, Mary, I'd like to we're going to ask Meryl Wingfield to come and give her presentation. Meryl, can you, before you get going and start sharing your slides, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yeah, looks and sounds great, Meryl. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And hi, everybody. Very pleased to be here. So as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm based in the UK, just south of London. We have a tiny bit of snow and a lot less cold than where Mary is. So I live here in the southeast of the UK with my partner, who actually also works for BP, and have 2 teenage stepchildren, and my cat, who you may well see because she is often very close. I've been in BP 15 years, and I'm very passionate about the environment. A bit like Mary, I spend a lot of time outside. I'm particularly interested in wildlife gardening in my garden, and have solar panels on my house and drive an electric car. So really thinking about my own personal impact as well as my impact professionally. So I'm just going to share my slides. Peter, can you just confirm that you can see those okay?
Yes, looks good.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about sustainability at BP, what that looks like, how it relates to our strategy, and a few examples of what that really means for us on the ground. So we know that energy is important for economic growth, for reducing poverty, for improving education. And I do not need to tell anybody, I'm sure, that we are, however, on an unsustainable path globally, and that there are issues across the board. So some examples here on emissions, on social issues, on the environment. But there is hope, I think, and we think, and an increased collective intent to act. And I think we see this in lots of different places from lots of different organisations and businesses, and really inspiring actually to hear Mary talk about Dow's journey, and many corporates in the private sector taking action on an ongoing basis. And we really believe that the private sector does have a big part to play here, and we want to contribute to that too. And we do believe that sustainability is both the right thing to do, but also really good business. So we launched a new purpose for BP about this time last year, which is reimagining energy for people and our planet. And we've also talked recently about our transition from an international oil company into an international energy company, which is what we're trying to do. So, and our strategy that we also announced last year puts that into practice and looks at what does that really mean about living our purpose. So this is our strategy for the group, which includes 3 focus areas, which are the 3 verticals you can see on here. So firstly, around low carbon electricity and energy. So that's about more renewable power. It's about getting into early positions on hydrogen and carbon capture, usage and storage, and also about expanding on our gas. And you may have seen some recent announcements for BP getting into new deals on offshore wind in particular, which is really exciting. The middle panel here is around convenience and mobility. So this is really putting the customer at the heart of the future of mobility. So looking at our role in electric vehicles, and also in terms of what we offer from a convenience retail point of view. And then lastly, around resilient and focused hydrocarbons. So hydrocarbons remaining part of the strategy, and an important cash flow to drive the rest of the strategy. We then talk about 3 differentiators, which are the horizontal bars here. So that's integrating the energy system, so taking all of the our different capabilities and combining them to be able to offer integrated solutions to customers. The middle one, which is around partnering with countries, cities, and industries as part of their goal towards net zero as well, and how we can partner on that. And then lastly, around driving innovation, particularly with a focus on digital in terms of efficiencies, but also building new businesses. And really importantly for today's conversation, the box around the outside, which is about our sustainability frame, which links our strategy, our purpose, and our ambitions around net zero. And that's what I'm going to focus on, is around our sustainability frame and what does that contain. So this is our sustainability frame, which has 4 parts to it. The first being the 3 focus areas that you can see in the middle: get to net zero, care for our planet, improve people's lives. Peter talked at the start about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and for us, part of creating this sustainability frame was around looking at those SDGs and thinking about where can BP have the most impact, where can we contribute the most, and that was a big driver in terms of how we've prioritized what we look at. And I'll get into some of the detail, and you'll see some of the SDGs reflected in some of the priorities that we talk about here. So for each of those 3 focus areas, we are defining aims and targets very clearly around what we're committing to across those 3 focus areas. The bottom half of this frame is really important in terms of how we go about delivering those aims. So the first on embedding into our DNA. This is really about making sustainability part of what we do, how we do things, who we are. So that includes integration into governance and decision making, and that's not something that we're starting from scratch on. So we've had board level committees and through the organisation looking at environmental issues, social issues, health and safety. So this is really about building on that and making it really systematic and strategic throughout the organisation. And then the last piece here on external collaborations. So we recognise that we can't do this on our own, and that we need to partner with others to really achieve our aims. So this is about how we can work together with partners and really shape the future together. We're going to focus on the three pieces in the middle and just talk through those a little bit and on what's underneath those. So starting with Get to Net Zero. So we've made, or we stated an aim that we are going to become a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, and we're also going to help the world to get to net zero. So we've set 10 aims underneath this, which set out how we're going to do that. 5 which are for BP and 5 which are helping the world. Of the 5 for BP, that includes a goal to get to net zero from an operational point of view by 2050, and that includes a target to reduce our operational emissions by 20% by 2025 and by 30 to 35% by 2030. Another of those aims looks at the products that we market and aims to reduce our carbon intensity of those products we market by half by 2050. And as part of that, we have a target to install 70,000 EV chargers globally by 2030. I just want to dig into that a little bit to give you an idea of, okay, this is, quite high level strategic. These are big aims. What does that actually mean on the ground? And this one in particular is a topic close to my heart as an EV driver. But we have around 7,500 EV charging points today, and we aim to install, as I said, 70,000 by 2030. In the countries that we're focused on, which is the UK, the US, Germany, and China, we want to build the most convenient, fastest public charging networks in those countries. And this is about reducing carbon emissions, but it's also a big business opportunity as well and drives value for us. In our 2020 energy outlook, we see numbers around 30% of all vehicle kilometers traveled by 2040 being electric. And that presents a big value opportunity for us as the gasoline and diesel volumes decline. So this is really a win-win in terms of reducing carbon emissions and driving business value. So the picture you can see here is a petrol station in the UK. In the UK today, we power almost 400,000 kilowatt hours a week in terms of EV driving, which translates into about 1.3 million miles, of electric driving a week, which I think is a really big number. And I mean, that's the data from last week. So despite being in lockdown, we're still able to really make a difference to the EV drivers in the country. The 2 chargers you can see at the bottom of this picture are ultra-fast chargers. They deliver about 100 miles of range in about 10 minutes, assuming your car can take that. We have installed about 60 of these in the UK so far, on about 30 petrol stations, and we have plans to install hundreds more over the coming years. So really, this for me is translating our purpose and our strategy and linking our sustainability through to on the ground and how supporting the growth of these in the country. Moving on to part of the sustainability frame, which is around improving people's lives. So we have defined at the moment our priorities in this space, building on a lot of the work that we've done in the past, and we will be announcing more detailed targets on this in the coming months. The priorities we've laid out here, you can see on the right-hand side. So providing more clean energy for more people. Access to energy, we know, is really important in terms of driving economic growth, reducing poverty. And this is also a key link into our strategy. So that first pillar I talked about around low carbon electricity, we have an aim to develop 50 gigawatts of renewable power by 2030. So this is a really key strategic driver for us as well. The second priority here around respect human rights, promote equality and sustainable livelihoods. So we believe everybody deserves to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. And we have a long history, particularly in the human rights area, and working really hard on diversity. So this is really incorporating some of what we've already done and really continuing to deliver on that. And the last one here around promoting wellbeing with a focus on mental and physical health. Again, this is something that we've been focused on for a long time. And I think with COVID-19, it's kind of brought a new significant challenge in this space. And we've been working a lot, particularly over the last year, on mental health and within BP, looking at the stigma or potential stigma associated with mental health. And we're very proud to support the mental health charity in the UK called Mind, who provides support to people with mental health issues. And particularly through COVID, we're finding that really beneficial, both for our employees, but supporting the broader community as well. And then on the last piece of the frame here, which is care for our planet, and this is actually the one that I'm accountable for and ties directly into my kind of passion for nature. Similarly to the Improve People's Lives area, we've got 3 priorities here, and we will be setting targets in the coming months on these 2. But looking at promoting cleaner environments, enhancing biodiversity and promoting natural climate solutions. I think we're all very aware that, you know, we have a climate crisis on our hands. We also have a biodiversity crisis on our hands. Those 2 things are not separate, they're interlinked, and we really need to be looking after our ecosystems. So that's our first priority area here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The second one is around using resources responsibly. Mary's talked quite a lot about the circular economy. We also are thinking about how we embed circularity in what we do, moving away from a linear world of take resources, use them, throw them away, thinking about how we can keep those materials in use for longer, how we can reduce the waste that we produce. And then lastly, around promoting sustainability in our supply chains and with our business partners. So we have a large global supply chain, as you might imagine, with thousands of suppliers. We really want to be working with people who share similar aspirations to us and looking at reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in our supply chain and our resource use. So another really important part of looking beyond just our own operations. So just to, as I said, to dig into the first one there and talk about biodiversity for a moment. We announced a new updated position on biodiversity last year. And this included the first point here on no oil and gas, a commitment to no oil and gas exploration in most sensitive protected areas. So we haven't done any exploration in these areas for the last 14 years. So this is translating this into like a formal commitment that we will not do this in the future either. And when we talk about the most sensitive protected areas, we're talking about UNESCO World Heritage Sites and also 2 of the protected areas that the International Union of Conservation of Nature define, which is wilderness areas and strict nature reserves. So that's a very that's a new formal commitment for us. The position also includes the 3 objectives you can see in the other bullet points. So having a net positive impact on biodiversity from new projects, enhancing biodiversity around our major operating sites, and also looking at other conservation projects and biodiversity restoration projects we can do in local areas where we operate. Coming back to the point I made at the beginning around we can't do this alone, we're partnering with, well, obviously with UNESCO, but also with Fauna and Flora International to deliver against these objectives, as they're real deep experts in this area. Again, back to what does this really mean on the ground? So I wanted to talk briefly about a project that actually started before this, before that biodiversity position, which is our Tangguh LNG operation, which is the 3rd largest liquefied natural gas operation in Indonesia. There's an expansion project at the moment underway to increase and build on that operation, which is helping to deliver the energy demand growth in the region. The operation there is in a biodiversity sensitive area, and as part of this expansion project, the project committed to no net loss of biodiversity and no long-term adverse effects on the 22 protected species that live in the area. And we're doing that through a combination of avoiding the most sensitive areas, on relocation of bird species, on habitat restoration, and a commitment to long-term monitoring so that we can understand what's going on the ground. And part of taking that approach, see, it's the right thing to do, but it also helped enable us get the financing required for the project. So there's a value driver there as well for us. So to close, I just wanted to come back to our purpose of reimagining energy for people and our planet. I'm hoping I've illustrated how we can go from our purpose to some real examples on the ground about what we're doing, and demonstrate that sustainability done well is both the right thing to do, but also good for business. Thank you, Peter. Back to you, I think.
Thank you very much, Merle. So as we start to think about what happens next in this session, and those of you that are attending, if you're not aware of what's happening with sustainability, and perhaps now you have a bit of an idea of a glimpse of the future for this manufacturing sector, right? So we've heard from chemicals industry, and we've heard from energy and oil and gas industry. So again, I remind everybody that's in attendance, please submit some questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will say that as a group focusing on sustainability for this session, we have met and we have a fairly structured panel and some questions and topics that we really want to cover during the next 45 minutes of this session. But so please, I encourage everybody to submit a question, and we'll see if we can get to it. So at this point in time, I'd like to invite Ron Beck, and Ron is Director of Industry Marketing with AspenTech. Ron, can you, before we get starting with the panel, would you mind introducing yourself and saying a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm maybe more aligned with Merrill in my background, but I've been in the oil industry and process industry area for almost 40 years. But I started my career working on environmental policy matters, and spent 10 years doing some of the major rule setting in the United States around air and water quality and how it interfaces with the energy industry. I just wanted to make an opening remark, which might be interesting. I'm actually also a wilderness canoeist, spend a lot of my summers in Canada. And I'd like to attest here to the power of everybody working collectively on these problems. Because as some of you, I'm old enough to know, but in 1962, a woman named Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring. And she was talking about DDT, which was one of the largest chemical products being produced, but it had a lot of negative environmental effects, which she brought to light. In 1970, and one of the biggest was that for large mammals, it did damage to their eggs. So there was some certain large mammals were becoming close to extinct, and eagles were one of the endangered species from that region. Well, I took a wilderness trip on a remote Canadian river in 1976. It was a river I was expecting to see a lot of eagles on. And I think I maybe saw 2 or 3 the entire trip. Well, I had the opportunity with my son, who's now grown up, and also working in the oil industry. But 3 years ago, I took a trip on the same river, and I think I saw about 100 eagles. It's 100 eagles on that trip. So that's a story about how the whole world basically, recognized the problem, but also, for example, the chemical industry put forth a huge amount of innovation to create a new set of products that could actually function, do the same things that DDT was doing, but in a more sustainable, better way, and it had a positive effect. Well, what we face now with our climate and plastics challenges are maybe bigger, but I think it's really a signal to all of us. And why am I on the panel with 2 of the leading company to what I would consider leading lights in terms of driving the chemical and energy industry towards sustainability? Well, technology is going to be a key part of making that happen. I think new types of partnerships between the technology sector and other players like that, and the large producers of value to the world are in order, to change the way companies work instead of just being suppliers to each other or vendors or customers, to collaborating to solve these big problems rapidly for the world. I don't know if that's the introduction you were expecting, but maybe sets the stage a little bit.
Ron, I can picture you canoeing on that Canadian river. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get started right now. So maybe the first question. This is probably one of the most important questions, and I think it's going to generate lots of interest from the people that are attending this session. And by the way, Meryl and Mary, I think that those were fabulous presentations. I think that there's a lot in there, and I think that there's going to be a lot more to come from both Dow and BP. So my first question, really this is to all panelists. There seems to be a disconnect between the corporate take on sustainability and how employees and workers can play a role in helping company sustainability goals. So given the large number of operations, engineering, maintenance, supply chain, business, health, safety, and environmental that are attending, this typical ARC advisory group conference. So the ones that are viewing this panel discussion, how can we drive sustainability down and make it really part of the DNA of those that are attending this session? And because of course, once they figure out how to make it part of their DNA, they're going to bring it back to their own companies, and this is just only going to grow. So, thinking about the DNA of every employee, or find ways for these roles to take a more active role. So just thinking about, advice to, embedding this in the DNA. And I know, Merle, you touched upon this a little bit in your presentation. Maybe we could start with you, and you could provide a comment and an answer about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Mary talked about it quite a bit as well. So for me, I actually don't see that much of a disconnect, or not everywhere. So there are definitely some places within our organization where it's more difficult for people to think about what they can do in their day job. But actually, in some areas, we have employees with more ideas than we kind of know what to do with, and such a lot of passion and commitment, and people who really want to get after it. They want to contribute. They hear about this stuff and care about this stuff, at home. And they want to get after it. So for a lot of it, actually, we don't have that much of a problem in that regard. Having said that, I think there is something about how do you make it systematic and really embedded in how you work and everything you do. So it's not just up to employees to be enthusiastic about it. And so I think that covers lots of different areas, right? It needs to be in systems and processes and governance, and how you reward people, and really throughout everything. And for me, I kind of think about safety as a parallel to that. So if I think about safety for us, it remains our top priority, and has done for a long time. And for safety, we have the systems, the processes, the training, the reward, all of that set up. Every employee knows their responsibility as it relates to safety, and that will vary, obviously, depending on your role. And I really think sustainability needs to become like that too. So yes, you have sustainability professionals who live and breathe this stuff every day, but all employees need to understand, have enough of a level of understanding and capability around sustainability for what they need for their job, and they understand what their role is and how they contribute to the sustainability goals that we have. So for me, I think at the minute we've got a bit of a way to go to being like completely, that it being systematic like that. But we've got tons of super passionate, enthusiastic employees with a lot of ideas. So I don't have a worry about that.
Okay, and I think there's a couple of points where I'd like to make. When I have visited refineries or chemical plants, normally there's some key indicators on the screen, like such as recordable injury frequency, or safety is our way of life, or there's other very important messages when you walk into industrial sites. So you're right. I think some companies I think may have a disconnect, and certainly others are much further ahead. But I think there's messaging definitely counts. So Mary, what about your perspective on making the DNA of sustainability or improving that at the worker level?
Peter, I think Merle did a great job of really giving us the foundational answer for that. I mean, at Dow, almost I said, I think Merle's been reading our playbook. This is it's a very similar, discussion. I think one of the interesting things about this for me personally, as we look at this, is this has been a journey, right? This is a journey. This takes time, it takes energy, and it also takes commitment from everybody, from your CEO to the operator and the board in your plant. And we started with safety. And I think Merle did it, I would agree with you. We have always had at the core of, in the fabric of our being, of who we are, has been our safety performance. Are we keeping people safe on the job? Are we operating our facilities safely? And we still track that today. We have metrics that we look at on our total worker health, our in transportation stewardship, our company's, injury and illness performance, those things. So I think that's always been, really the bedrock. Now we've, like Merle has said, we have ideas and ideas and ideas and ideas. And what you've seen is kind of this explosion, really, of excitement around sustainability like never before. And I think that, as I talk to my colleagues, my peers, one of the most exciting things is when you go in to a recruiting conference, and I'm sure Merle and Ron, you've both been there. The most highly attended discussion that we have is when one of my colleagues, Eunice Heath, goes and talks about sustainability. It's standing room only, right? So there is an excitement and passion around sustainability like never before, but it has to be supported from your leadership. And I would say that what's really exciting at Dow is that on every global broadcast, on every leader call, anything where you hear our executive leadership talking, they are talking about sustainability. They talk about it. They have strong passion for it. And that is really important. It's very, very important. And it's permeated in everything that we do, every decision that we make, when we talk about capital investment, when we talk about employees, everything. Sustainability is brought into that discussion. And it's not just about environment anymore. It's about everything else, the social aspects, how we engage in our communities. Merle did a great job of talking about this at, what happens at BP. How do we interface with our customers? How do we interface with our communities? And then how do we tell the world about what we're doing, right? So I think it starts first with great safety performance, and then it builds from there. And right now, it's a very exciting time to be a practitioner in this space. It's a very, very exciting time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So Ron, what about you? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting to me because I sort of can see the rest of the picture because I visit plants and companies all the time. And definitely you've selected because they have a really good story to tell and can sort of lead the way for other companies. But there's a wide spectrum of opportunities on the sustainability picture. And definitely I agree with both of you, Mary and Merle, because and especially I know I've been to a lot of Dow sites, and this concept of Team Dow is definitely a true concept. And so I'm sure there's a high level of visibility. I think you mentioned so the idea of safety. Okay, it is a huge guidepost there. I mean, almost any plant or refinery you go into, there'll be a large sign on the gate, 237 days since the last accident. And so two things about that. So then the question arises, okay, so we need a sign on the gate saying, we've reduced our carbon emissions by, 200,000 tons in the last 9 months or whatever the number is. So that's not there yet, right? And the other part, and so now it's a digital world. So, and I saw someone already put into the window there, where does digitalization play? Well, this is one area clearly. Now you can assemble that data so everybody who works there can know how much, what's our energy use in my plant? What did the job I just do today affect? How did that affect our energy use in this plant? I turned this unit up by 3%. What did that do? I did X. What did that do? So I think there's that level of visibility and transparency. But I think it's also true, this is an odd initiative in a way. It's very much driven executive suite down, as opposed to, let's say, at a working level. So almost maybe many of the people at this conference have medium to low visibility into what exactly their executive suite is thinking about sustainability. At the same time, the CEO's metrics may be heavily tied to sustainability because the board of directors cares because it affects their stock price. So yeah, I think that is, and I think it's up to everybody in the community of the process industries and other industries, not just the employees, but the public at large. How do we actually explain to them what the progress is and where the progress can be made? Because there's a very simplistic black and white view that people take, of both the oil and chemical industries today, or energy industries, sorry. But
Right.
yeah, so those are all ideas there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit. So going forward, let's talk about the barriers, right? So, question, and maybe we'll start with you, Merle. So, what will be some of the barriers to making progress in meeting these very ambitious sustainability goals? So maybe we can, start with, what are some barriers that BP has already experienced, and how are you overcoming these? Because the lessons learned from BP I think will go a long way in helping other companies make progress.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, one of the particular ones that springs to mind for me on challenges is that, and I talked about this a bit already, but recognizing that we can't do this on our own, and we don't have all the answers, and we don't have all the skills and capabilities that we need to do it, and therefore we have to partner with others in order to achieve our aims. And in some ways that's more complicated because it's not all within our control, but we absolutely recognize that that's what we need to do. And I think it's quite interesting because we're starting to form partnerships that are a bit different to maybe ones we have in the past. So I mentioned Fauna and Flora International on biodiversity. So they're helping us develop our net positive impact methodology for how we measure biodiversity. So, they're deep technical experts in that space. They have experience from working with other companies in other sectors, and credibility because they're independent. So actually having a partnership with them and getting that external challenge from them is invaluable, really. So that's sort of maybe unusual for an oil and, well, I guess energy company, oil and gas company, however you think about us, to be partnering with a conservation NGO. And then another kind of new partnership for us is partnering with cities. So we partnered with the City of Houston, for example, as part of their climate action plan, to help support them on their net zero journey, and then also have, as part of that, have an alliance with Uber to help develop EV charging infrastructure for Houston to help Uber transition to electric, which helps obviously on emissions, but also on community health. And I don't, maybe people wouldn't think about a city as a kind of an obvious partner. And then maybe more traditionally, if you like, we're also partnering with people like Microsoft. As our partnership with Microsoft, we're helping them, providing them with renewable power to help them with their net zero aims. They're helping us with our digital transformation around cloud services, and then we're working together on technology solutions related to sustainability. So I guess three quite different types of partnerships that really, I think, help us get over that one of those hurdles around, we don't have all the answers, we can't do it all on our own.
Right. Okay. Mary, what do you think about barriers and Dow?
I think Merle's exactly where we are in this space also. We can't do this alone, right? We talk about partnerships, much like you, and we're partnering with people that maybe before, like Merle said, that, these aren't people we would normally have sought out to partner. I mean, we had the same situation on one of our sustainability goals, our nature goal, where we're looking to provide $1 billion worth of value for the company over a 10-year period. We went and we went to the Nature Conservancy, very different, a chemistry, a chemical company and a conservation company coming together. How does that work? A lot of people are like, how does that work? We had some really big skeptics, both inside and outside the company. But what was really exciting, and I think that it's about common purpose, right? The nature goal and Dow both had a very strong interest in understanding how, nature impacts our business decisions and how do we make better business decisions. And so, you know, they came understanding the science, we came understanding the science, and together the end result has been extremely powerful. I mean, we have both grown as a result of that relationship. And I think that that just really says, okay, you know, we are going to have to come together, work with people that we've not always worked with. We're going to have to lean in. We're really going to have to lean in together to say, hey, how do we solve climate change? How do we solve plastic waste in the environment? You know, how do we invent, you know, how do we innovate chemistries that are better for all of us? And I really think too, we have to challenge ourselves to think bigger, bolder, and much more braver than we've ever thought ever before. And I think that, you know, it'll be a bit of an uncomfortable space sometimes, but it's going to be in a tremendously rewarding as time goes on. But commonality of purpose is really important, and collaboration moving forward.
Good, thanks. Okay, so Merle, you mentioned Microsoft. This is almost a lead-in for Ron. So Ron, representing a software company, thinking about partnerships. You know, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I'm going to mention two other types of barriers, and in the process, I'll answer your question. Um, you know, to me, speed is a barrier. Okay, because and both Mary and Merle talked about your goal. You know, both companies have a set a 2050 goal of being carbon neutral to the world, right? So including scope 3 emissions, which is a formidable challenge, especially for BP. Um, and dozens of other companies have had similar goals. A few have set even more aggressive goals. Okay, so Sinopec says they're going to be net zero carbon by 2035. Uh, E&I says they're going to be net zero carbon in a similar scale. It's very difficult. I put so speed is a challenge because Merle mentioned hydrogen. Technologies like the hydrogen economy or carbon capture are barely, people say they're commercialized. They're barely commercialized. The economics are very difficult in both of those areas right now. Yet they're going to be crucial to achieving this net zero. So I would almost put the analogy to if you bring it back to COVID-19. Okay, over the last, we've all seen that the pharmaceutical industry basically on an unprecedented scale collaborated, crossed boundaries and so forth. And in a year, they were able to come up with a vaccine, multiple vaccines that normally people said, well, the fastest these can be developed is in 5 or 10 years. And they were fully developed in 1 year. How? Through collaborations, unprecedented use of technology, and so forth. And that's what's going to happen here. Dow, for example, can invent some of these new plastics that Mary is talking about. How do you bring those to scale, to global scale? Let's say in the speed you need to achieve the goals. It's going to need, the types of technologies companies like we and Microsoft and so forth have to how do you execute all of these things and make very complex technologies work with the workers that are available today, and make it all happen in 10, 15 years when normally, the long range research studies say it'll take 30 to 40 years for those things to become, but we can do it faster, but we need to collaborate in a different way. So, and I think the other way technology plays a key role here is this transparency and visibility. So one of the barriers is if you're the CEO, if you're Jim Fitterling from Dow, how do you know actually how your company is doing? And I would guess 90% of the companies who are listening here don't really have a way to roll up a measurement fast, in real time, of how all their assets are doing from a sustainability viewpoint. So that's going to require digital technology because a management team and a group of employees can't all pivot to solve a problem in one asset or one region that's starting to appear if they get the information 3 or 4 months later or a year later. So those are some of the barriers, and it's all about, to me, speed and visibility and ability to measure.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Ron. So, another thought here, which I think is probably quite important, of all the attendees in this session, are probably thinking about, what are they going to do next? What is that next big project? Is it an extension into smart cities and digitalization? Is it new facilities and new technologies that are being worked on now by some of the collaborators? So maybe I'll leave this as an open question to everybody, and because maybe in some cases it's a little bit simplistic. And of course, my background is oil and gas as well, and I can remember back in the 90s when the oil and gas companies were shedding retail quickly. And so I think, that was, something that was really important in the day. And clearly, that customer connection, and Merrill, in your slide, I think it was just beautiful to show the energy choices in that wonderful convenience store. So perhaps on the energy side, the investments are maybe a little bit easier, but I'll just pose the question and leave it open to all of you. So in order to begin, the journey to, this low carbon, net zero, or more sustainable and recyclable products, capital investment does indeed need to shift. So about the capital, so what changes in capital investment, in your opinion, will be needed? So for the energy industry, is that things like blue or green hydrogen, renewables, or in the chemicals industry, is this changes that could be reflected in advancements in material science, or new types of reactors and things like that, or value chain partnerships, or even business models? So really, this is an open question. What do each of you think about this shift in capital investment from the last decade?
How about if I start off this time?
Sure, Ron. Yeah, go ahead.
So we've done a lot. We've actually had a task force running that I'm a main member of over the past 2 months to understand how we innovate technology to support this shift. And a big part of it is where our company's going to shift to. And we've identified 14 major, what we call them sustainability use cases. How are companies going to shift their businesses, both energy and chemicals and mining? And then you sort of map it against companies and timescales. And the interesting thing is there's no different companies are doing different things. So there's no common agreement as to where to put the capital investment over the next 10 to 15 years that's actually going to be the competitive advantage for the future. Because you take 15 energy companies, they're 15 different strategies, because there are different levers. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges is the selection and the long range planning and which ones will win. And again, what Mary and Merle are both saying, this is where collaborations are needed. And like you said, unusual collaborations. We actually just sort of forced our way into the Alliance to End Plastic Waste because it was basically all chemical companies. And we said, well, we want to join. And they said, why? Because we think we have some innovation to add. You need technology to end plastic waste, actually. So they said, okay, we have to come up with a new categories to allow you to be a partner. But that's important. Because that way people will. Because what's happening is there's a fragmentation. Some companies are looking at hydrogen. Some companies are looking at carbon capture, et cetera, and so forth. And I think that I also listened to Davos sessions last 2 weeks ago, and very interesting session that Bill Gates was a leading member of on carbon markets. And I think that's a crucial aspect here also in this whole capital area, because I think it's easy in Europe and the United States, there's access to massive amounts of capital. And so fundamentally, whatever Dow decides to do as a strategy, if the institutional markets agree, they can do it. They can access the capital. But it's these these carbon markets that will allow things like offsets. So companies like aircraft companies that have to buy fuel and run planes, they need to buy carbon offsets to move toward net carbon too. So there's a lot of argument as to in the sustainability guru community, is this fair? And I think the argument that's very strong is it is fair because you need to give, so all, for example, the chemical businesses and oil businesses in developing markets need the same, they can't pursue the sustainability initiatives the same way Western companies can unless they get access to this huge amount of capital needed to make these shifts. So I'd say in the capital area, it's, quickly figuring out which are going to be the winners and collaborating together to make those progress collectively with the capital investment needed. And the other is how do you shift capital access to the developing markets and therefore the companies in those geographies.
Right. Yeah. Mary or Merle, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would just add, I think, Ron, you hear the common theme, right? We've got to work together. And this is something that you have to work
Right.
together because, we don't have all the funds to be able to develop some of these technologies that you have. One of the things that we've spent quite a bit of time on is this roadmap, just really sitting down and giving some thought to what does this look like? How do we advance carbon capture? How do we advance carbon sequestration? How do we advance hydrogen? What does that really take? And I think that's been a really a great exercise for us. And our industry associations doing the same thing. It's like, and then we can inform ourselves. Okay, what do we need from a government? What do we need from academia? What do we need from the industry to pull together and then to work on solving this? I think we're only limited by our ability to dream too, right? I mean, so if we have the idea, let's figure out if it works or not, fail fast and move forward quickly. I also think that we talked about partnerships. I mean, from a Dow perspective, we're looking at all kinds of different options. And we'll go have a kind of a joint venture with someone like we have one with Shell right now to look at electrification of crackers. How are we going to do that productively? And I think, Ryan, you've brought up some excellent points about us advancing with it's almost like the right people to get this done. But again, the common theme is coming way back, right back to the collaboration. Like we have to work together. Not what piece of the pie is mine, but how do we make the pie bigger, right? Instead of, and then in turn, advancing the success of these types of challenges. Merle, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the coming together point is, as you said, definitely a thread through all of it. I mean, in terms of capital investment in the energy sector, I think it's, well, at a really high level, it's pretty well understood. I think, we need to move towards renewables and hydrogen, the CCUS, and that's where the capital is shifting, albeit different in different geographies and for different companies. Ron, as you said, depending on what strategy they're choosing to take. So I think that's all I would add on that at the moment.
So there's been a couple of questions come in, and of course, a lot of people attending the ARC conference, they have some role in digital technologies, whether it be a solution provider or system integrator or somebody that's involved in the development of a project or an asset owner. So let's just talk a little bit about the role of the digital technologies when considering sustainability objectives. So how do you see underlying technology unfolding in the production of sustainable products? So I guess, I suppose Mary and Merle, you each have different perspectives on this, but do you see technology or digitalization, any kind of technology helping you to meet your sustainability objectives? Maybe we'll start with you this time, Merle.
Oh, I feel like Mary always ends up having to go last. Sorry, Mary. Do you want to take this one first?
You go ahead, Merle. You go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess Ron's touched on some of this already, but I think for me, technology broadly, including digital, is going to be absolutely fundamental to us being able to do this. And I really liked Ron's example of like, how do you know when you change a particular bit of kit, or swap your compressor from being diesel to electric? Like, how does that, what impact are you having, and how do you know what to change? So I think there's a big piece around how do you understand the different data sources and track data that you haven't done before? How do you get into measurement and sensing of substances probably isn't the right word, but of things that you've maybe not done before. And I think a piece as well that is really hard, and we have definitely not got this cracked yet, but is around traceability and understanding through your whole value chain where are materials coming from, where's the carbon footprint coming from, do you understand human rights issues, modern slavery issues, etc., through your supply chain, but also on materials use, where are you using it, and when you get to end of life, how do you make sure you know where it is so you can reuse it or remanufacture it, etc. So, I mean, that's just a few examples, I think, but there's an absolute wealth of challenges, I think, that different types of technology we will need in order to succeed.
Yeah, and Merle, I would add, if you think about what does technology bring? I mean, if you can dream it, you can do it. It's limitless, really. It is. And I will tell you, I have a personal passion in this. I am not very good at understanding every aspect of technology, and Ron and I had a chance to talk a little bit. It's amazing what you can do, right? What you can do. And Merle mentioned a few, but for us, it's like, okay, how can you use technology to report faster than you do now? To give real-time data updates, to look at, if I think about just something as simple as how do you predict where the next issue might be, right? Advanced machine learning. How do you do e-commerce? How can we use our, that phone that we hold in the palm of our hand has tremendous power, right? How do I put that power to work? So I think that, we are looking at digital tools in so many aspects of how we do business. And I think that the pandemic has obviously accelerated a lot of that activity. When we talk about how do we, solve challenges, we got to lean in and accelerate. I think for us, digital capability accelerated during the last 12 months. And in turn, it's going to help us, solve sustainability challenges. As we look in our R&D space, how do you rapidly, move through, R&D advancements? How do we do that, faster than we ever have before? That's all about digital technology. It's all about technology helping us advance. So I think that there's much yet to come in this space, and it's exciting to watch, and it's exciting to see how that can enable us to get to, as Ron talked about, speed. Get to get to solving challenges that we have in the sustainability space much faster than we ever thought.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So Ron, obviously, you're going to have an opinion here. Let's add another dimension to this, and that's, we're, still, in recovery mode of, COVID-19. So there's still a need for digital technologies. The need for sustainability is not going away. So what are you seeing in industry?
Well, I'm seeing that we did a survey subsequent to the one you talked about just a month ago, and definitely, and tried to look at both sustainability and digitalization, but people are redoubling their investment in digital. I think everybody working from home, has opened people's eyes as to the possibilities and the necessities. But let me just paint a quick picture, just a possibility here for how digital will really help this. And this is actually a real case I've been working on conceptually over the last few months with a customer. So imagine like the gas station that Meryl showed the picture of, and now it's the future. So you have multiple, you can buy hydrogen, put it in your car, or mixed hydrogen and natural gas, or you could buy gasoline that's 50% renewable, biofuels based, and 50%, because there's going to be an evolution here. There's a reality in the world that you're not going to switch off oil and gas and switch on other things, right? So now you go into the gas station in the US, certainly at least, you have a choice. You can buy regular gas, premium gas, super premium gas, and they come at different prices, and they give your car a different power level, right? So in the future, the company I've been working with had the concept of, if we had the traceability, so we knew this fuel that's being sold in this pump has a higher percent renewables, a lower carbon footprint, if you will. I can pay, let's say, 25 cents more a gallon and buy the 50% low carbon fuel versus buying the cheaper one that's higher carbon. So that's an example. It could apply to chemicals you buy in the paints you buy in the store or anything else, right? Pesticides, whatever it is you're buying. That you have a choice as a consumer. Do I want to be sustainable or not? And we know a lot of this is coming from a huge social pressure that we want the world to be this way. I think digital we're all in business. Give the consumers a choice to buy the right thing, if you will, and let them pick. And if you have that traceability, you can do that. And so you bring them into the equation instead of it being us versus them in a way, right? Just
Right.
a thought there. But digital, that's all possible today. I mean, if you think of an oil company, um, for a couple of years, they've been using our advanced models so that, any oil and gas field, the wells have different ownership percentages. So you might, in the Texas Permian, you might have, a gas processing plant that's got fed by 200 different wells with a whole, bee's nest of different ownership percentages. And they can calculate today who gets the revenue out of that, even though it's all merged together and processed, because our models can calculate all that. Basically, what's called basically the accounting of the shares. So that, I think that traceability can be easily extended into the whole life cycle of all kinds of materials and energy sources.
Okay. We've got about 8 minutes left, and so there's another question. I know this is a question that we talked about as a team beforehand, but it's in line with another one that's come in. So clearly, BP and Dow have invested and plan to invest significantly in sustainability initiatives. So the question is, how will the investment be visible to the investor community? Because I mentioned earlier, BlackRock, and we all know about statements that BlackRock and asset owners are making about investing in companies that have sustainability at the center of their portfolio. So this is probably really, really important, and maybe this is an extension beyond some of the things that you had mentioned, Ron, about visibility. So the question is how will the investments be visible to the investor community, going forward? Let's start with you, Mary.
Sure, Peter. A couple of things on this one. I would say that the investor community will see what we do by our results, right? We have declared goals. They will see how we're progressing by our results. So we have consistently reported metrics, and we constantly are improving and increasing our transparency outward. I also think that we support the harmonizing of ESG metrics. I think right now there are a lot of efforts to say, okay, what are the most critical ones? We see a lot of different agencies that pull together different metrics and interpret things very differently. Well, can that be on a common platform? And there's a tremendous amount of work going on right now to do that with some of the the key players in this, GRI, SASB, Global Standards Board, to say, okay, how do these metrics, what are the metrics that we really need to be looking at and reporting? I would also say that, I've had the opportunity to speak with our investors, right? I'm part of the discussion that we have with them. Their engagement is very high. They ask really, they're very interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then they're also really good about giving us feedback on what would help them better understand what we're doing. So that's been a very helpful exercise for us. But, bottom line is we're going to continue on this journey with ESG. We are definitely interested in seeing more common frameworks that make it, I think, easier for all of us to look at and understand what a company is doing. And then in turn, how do we continue to evolve our ability to report and be transparent about everything that we do.
Right. Mary, what about, or Merle, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think Mary and I, obviously, I don't know, we didn't swap notes, but we we could have done, because I would agree with all of that. I mean, I talked before about we've set 10 aims around net zero, 5 to help BP and 5 to help the world get to net zero. And one of those, on helping the world, is our transparency aim, in terms of aiming to become a transparency leader in our sector. So it's something we're really focused on, and our CEO talks very publicly and passionately about. So we just recently, actually in the last couple of weeks, signed up or announced our support for the World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism metrics, which go exactly to Mary's point of trying to get a consistent set of metrics that are used widely across the ESG, so that so that we're reporting, everyone has a common understanding of one set of metrics, so that we're, and also, I mean, back to the point on measurement and data, getting the right data is can be quite challenging. And if we're reporting on multiple different metrics in lots of different ways, then that adds that extra level of complexity as well. So I definitely agree with Mary on the trying to get a consistent set would be great. But I think not wanting to repeat Mary really, but it's about setting the right targets and demonstrating delivery against them. And those targets are, both financial as they always have been, but also across the rest of the ESG space. And that's what we need to be, measured on, is do we deliver?
Right, yeah. And I think there was another question that came in quickly before we get to you, Ron. The question was about net zero and what does it mean for BP? Is this operations or is this products? And I think based on what you've already showed us today, you're including scope 3 emissions, which includes all of your products, which certainly makes that whole visibility, so much more challenging.
Yeah, so we have specific targets, some for operations and some for products. So yeah, absolutely covers both. Yep.
Yeah. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and really what I'd like to do is just summarize. And I know, Ron, we cut you off a little bit on that last question, but feel free to interject at the very end. So, in terms of this audience at ARC Advisory Group, the engineers, the operations, supply chain, business, smart cities, there really is quite a diverse group here, but they're all, really hungry for that next project and knowing how they can make a difference. And if sustainability is of the paramount importance, which we believe it is, based on our talk today, what do you recommend, this group in closing?
I can start out if you want.
Sure, go ahead, Ron.
I mean, I'm in an interesting place. I talk from executives to the users of our software, who are typically, planners and chemical engineers and things like that. And I think, what advice I give is everybody needs to educate themselves, because this is a fast-moving area. There's a lot of new concepts that aren't, I think, comfortable or familiar to people, just in terms of being able to understand and discuss it. I think to be able to take action in your companies, a lot of education is needed to educate you. There's a lot of, I think, simplistic information out there, and to understand it to some depth will help all of you help your companies. I think would be just one general point there. And
Right.
I guess maybe just one other quick point is, just to tie into that previous step, I think that for the investment community, there's some element where one company might do better than another by showing they've done a better job of sustainability and get their stock price rewarded for that. But fundamentally, for the whole industry, everybody gets punished by the worst players. And that's true in safety. I think all the companies know it's in everybody's interest for everybody to be safe, because it just takes one accident from one company to paint the whole industry that everybody has to pull themselves out from that hole. And I think everybody in the industry who's attending this conference and elsewhere plays a role in educating their friends and colleagues and other companies about, the positive, how all the efforts that Mary and Meryl are talking about here.
Okay. Mary, any final comments before we wrap it up?
I just quickly say the case for sustainability in my mind is very clear, right? This is about you continuing to be relevant to those in which you provide, products and services. And I think it's important. You just have to drive the stake in the ground and say, we're going to start here. It may be something small that will eventually grow too big, but it's sustainability. The case for sustainability is very clear when it comes to our business.
Right. Thanks, Mary. And what about you, Meryl? Closing comments?
So I think it's Mary, we can't be on a panel together again, because we're just going to repeat each other. But which is why I'm hesitating slightly. But I think for me, it's about getting into action. If you're not in action already, I think it's not just about mitigating risk. It's about delivering value. And I believe that everybody, both in their professional life and their personal life, can make a difference in this space and needs to be making a difference in this space. So I would say get into action if you're not already.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Meryl. So we're about out of time, and those of you that attended the session and we didn't answer your question, we will follow up with you after the session. So thanks for submitting those. And Merle, thank you so much. It was so good to meet you virtually, and maybe we'll meet in person one day. Same for you, Mary. I hope it gets warmer in where you are. And it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And Ron from Aspen Tech, thanks very much. So thank you.
Peter, thanks
Total
for having us.
pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.